Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Broken Sword 2: The Smoking Mirror Remastered for PC, Mac, and iOS. Obviously, this is very similar to what Revolution Software did with the original Broken Sword in releasing the Director's Cut Edition, which basically upgraded the graphics and interface, added a hint system into the game, and added a number of other little touches and some new things in there to try to expand upon the original Broken Sword. The problem was that I didn't really like what they did in that. There were some things that were better than others, obviously. But for the most part, the original Broken Swords Director's Cut Edition was fairly wimpy. And so, going into this, I was kind of concerned. I didn't know whether it was going to be better than the Shadow of the Templars Director's Cut or not. I didn't know what exactly they had changed, to be honest with you, because I didn't really look it up all that much. I just got it automatically when I got Broken Sword 2 on GOG anyway. But the thing was, Broken Sword 2, when it was originally released, was not particularly well received. It wasn't badly received either, but people were just like, it's not as good as the original. It's okay, but other than that, and the Remastered Edition, on the other hand, was very well received. In fact, it was pretty much nothing but praise for it. So I kind of wonder what happened there. Did they overcome what happened in Director's Cut of Shadow of the Templars, and which actually made it a weaker game, or did they just take what made Broken Sword 2 solid enough as it was, and just expand upon that? Well, as far as the presentation goes, it really hasn't changed all that much from the original Broken Sword 2. They added in the portrait feature from the Shadow of Templars Director's Cut, where when people are talking, it shows their face, and you actually get facial animations this time around where they're actually talking as opposed to just sitting there with an expression on their face. But other than that, the visuals are all the original games, only sharper and clearer. So it's higher quality image work. But other than that, the graphics are pretty much the same. Sound design is also pretty much the same. They made things a little bit higher quality here and there. There still are the problems of the music being just generic. It's not bad, but it doesn't really carry a sense of wonder with it like the original game kind of did. And the voice acting is, it's all over the place. On some characters, you actually have really good voice acting, like George. He's still very well voiced. But other times, you have the people who can vary wildly, like Nico, or people who just aren't that great to begin with, like most of the characters in the game, actually. So, the voice acting's still all over the place. Sound effects are pretty much the same, so I can't really comment on that other than they do their job, and that's about it. I know I use that phrase all the time, but it works. So, really, the presentation is just the original games only slightly enhanced to be a more modern-looking game. And this wasn't a bad thing, either. They just retooled the interface to make it look more in line with what they did with Director's Cut of the original game. And they just enhanced the visuals a little bit. But everything is still almost exactly the same. But when it comes to the story and the gameplay, this is where Shadow of the Templars Director's Cut bothered me. I said that the added bits to the storyline that were in the Director's Cut of that were just not that great. And in fact, they detracted from the gameplay experience. In this one, however, they got rid of that. They didn't really change the storyline, at least not that I could notice. So, it's the exact same experience you got with the original Broken Sword 2 in terms of storyline. This isn't a bad thing, nor is it a particularly good thing, because the story in that game was kinda you play, once again, as George Stobart, and in fact, you actually get to play as Nico as well. This was the first game in the series to let you play as Nico in certain bits of the game, and it would split between them depending on what the bit of the story was. But, you once again play as George Stobart and Nico Collard, and they're up to their typical mystery hijinks where George actually has to go and rescue Nico because she's been kidnapped. And it ends up going into this thing where she's investigating this guy named Karzak, and it goes into the supernatural when they get to this plot involving the Maya. And it's the idea of this dark god that will come back at the end of the 5th cycle, and it's kind of apocalyptic and everything. So, it's kind of interesting to see this mythology reflected in this game, but it doesn't really feel like it's all that connected to the original Broken Sword. So, they didn't really do anything to add to that either, and that was one of the problems with the original Broken Sword 2, by the way. it didn't feel all that connected to Shadow of the Templars. But still, the story is pretty much exactly the same unless they changed something and I didn't notice it, so they did a good job with that, at least. But how's the gameplay? Did they change that? Well, no, they didn't. The puzzles and everything are still exactly the same as they were in the original Broken Sword 2. The difference being they kept the little flashing icon things on what you can interact with, which was one of the things I didn't like about Shadow of the Templars Director's Cut. It makes the game a little easier. The difference being in this game, the puzzles are a little more complex than they were in Shadow of the Templars. And as a result, they're a little harder to figure out. So it doesn't affect you as much, but it still makes things a lot easier. Because now you know what you can interact with. You don't have to sit there and say, what is there in this scene that would be useful to me? You can just tell right off the bat where this little flashing blue thing says, hey, look at this. This is something you can interact with. Or look at, or something like that. So that makes the game a little bit easier. And it's not a particularly hard game to begin with. There's a couple of puzzles that are kind of tedious, but other than that, there's nothing that's really going to boggle your mind. You're just going to get it. And it's pretty much stuff that an adventure game fan will be very comfortable doing. They'll be able to catch it just very easily. So the game is made even easier, and it wasn't that hard to begin with. One thing that they did do that was nice, they did do the hint system like they did in Director's Cut of the original Broken Sword, which is handy for new players, but for experienced people, it's just kind of pointless. And they do actually give it a sort of unlock system, so you just keep hitting, give me a hint, as opposed to just tell me how to do this thing. So you can go through all the hints if you want, and actually it'll tell you how to do the thing, but it's also done in such a way that you can just get the exact bit you need to know what you need to do next. And the first hint in there is always pretty vague. It just gives you a basic idea, so that helps out quite a bit. But the gameplay is pretty much exactly the same. It's all the same puzzles. It's just with that indicator of what you can interact with. So really, the majority of changes to this game were fairly minimal. They were just updating the graphics and the interface to be a little bit more user-friendly. And in fact, the interface is an improvement over the original Broken Sword 2. I did like that about it. Because the original interface was a little hard to get used to. It wasn't bad, but it was just kind of awkward. You had to get used to the way that they did things in that. Whereas in the Broken Sword 2 Smoking Mirror Remastered, it's a little easier to see what you can interact with in the interface. It's done in a very simple way of just click on a corner and it'll tell you what you need to know. Like bottom left corner, inventory. Bottom right corner is your notes. Top left corner is the options, and then top right corner is the hints and the stuff like that. And they did throw in a few extras here and there. There's a bit at the main menu where you can go to a comic that's kind of leading up to what happens in the game. And you can unlock concept art and stuff like that as well. So that's kind of nice. But ultimately, it's not a huge improvement on Broken Sword 2 by itself. It's just there in case you didn't want to play the original game. And in fact, on PC, it's packaged with the original game. So you might as well just play the original. And if you like it, then you can go on to play the remastered version and just have that better graphics look to it. But other than that, there's really nothing to say about the Smoking Mirror Remastered. It's just the original Broken Sword 2 done over again with better graphics. And that's probably what the Shadow of the Templars Director's Cut should have been, and that's actually a good thing in this case. That said, I wasn't a big fan of Broken Sword 2 to begin with. It's not a bad game, but nor is it particularly good. That's why I give this remake a 3 out of 5. Thanks for watching.